Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I am filming a single book review. Who am I? But it's ARC season now because I got a bunch of ARCs from Justine. I need to read them. I mean, no one is telling me I have to, but I want to read them. And welcome to a bunch of reviews that is coming very soon on my channel. The first one I got to was My Father, the Panda Killer by Jamie Jo Hoang. This one is releasing on the 29th of August, the last time I checked at least. You never know these days. It might change. And it is set in 2 timelines. And we follow a main character who's called Jane. She lives in San Jose in 1999. And she has a very complicated relationship with her father, who, let's say it as it is abusive. And she has all her life hated, dreaded, avoided Vietnamese culture of where her father is from. Now just opening herself up to it more, or maybe getting another perspective on this, and it's changing that maybe this isn't something that she should have avoided all this time. She also has a younger brother called Paul, and she's leaving for college after this summer, and she doesn't know how she's gonna do the leaving, because then she leaves, Paul in a abusive household. And then we have another storyline, which is between every chapter. We follow Fuke, who is Jane's father in 1975 when he lives in Vietnam and is trying to escape the country when it is, the war and it's unsafe. He goes through so much trauma and shit, a lot of trigger warnings that death and horribleness and just so much shit he goes through before eventually he obviously finds his way over to America and gets his family that we are now in. Jane kind of knows about some of the things, but he never spoke about it directly to her. So it's kind of heard bits here and there when he talked to other family members or friends, etc. Which I would say affects her view on her father. But yeah, more about that later. But it's basically the story with these 2 timelines where we have, trauma happening different places. It's kind of sad, but it's also kind of, letting out a breath you didn't know you were holding almost. And it tells a really deep and hard story. I think it's a hard read, but also a really, giving one. While at the same time, I have some reservations as well, which I will also, of course, talk about. I feel like the book brings up many different topics. Among them, I don't know if it's the right word, but generational trauma. I don't know if that's the right word for it. I'm not good with terminology. But basically because the father goes through all this trauma, transfer the trauma to his children. And it's also talk about how when Jane is with other people that is also Vietnamese in her family, how to talk about they all being beaten around, and how to talk about this is a cultural thing and that other people wouldn't understand. But then she also has a friend that is also Vietnamese, that this has never happened to her. What do you mean? Is this normal? This creates a huge rift in her friendship because Jane feels she doesn't understand her. And I'm just it's making, I don't know personally, even I'm not an expert on this by any means. I don't know enough about this by any means. But for me, it's abuse is abuse. And it's not a good thing either way. Obviously, I'm not saying that the character thinks it's a good thing either. But it's kind of how she just accepted how it is. But that's also normal for people, I think, that are in toxic and traumatizing situations. They kind of normalize it, to survive. So I don't know if she's making excuses for her father because she's trying to understand him. But at the same time, does he deserve to be understood just because he has gone through trauma himself? That's what I'm trying to ask. And I'm not saying that I know the answer to this question. I'm just saying that every person needs to answer this for themselves. But the book asks this in a way that it's hard to, know what you think about it as well. Because you get a lot of sympathy with him of what he goes through. But at the same time, I personally cannot excuse the behavior he has towards his children, even from what culture he's from. But I feel this is a huge subject, a huge thing that, again, I don't have the answers to. It's just how I feel. I feel a part of me is uncomfortable feeling sympathy with this person that is beating his child. And again, I don't know how to talk about it because I don't want to seem oh my god, but this is the correct thing to do and this is the correct thing to think. Because I don't. But just personally, it's just yes, I went through all this shit. but why is she shit? You know? And obviously everyone responds differently to trauma and to what going through their lives, and that is fine. It was a hard time, and I guess that's kind of the point of the story as well. I don't know how personal this story is, because it's in the beginning, it says that the author wrote this story for herself and for her father. It says, my father, the Panda killer, is a story about my dad, but my dad has not read this book. In fact, he doesn't know that it exists, and actually I'm not actually sure how I would tell him. So it's like, is this the relationship that the author had with her dad? And I'm not saying that like I'm judging that relationship or whatever, but then it seems like a very personal journey, a very personal understanding to like how she feels towards her dad and to her heritage as well. And that it makes, I think, the story more complex, because then like we're reading a personal journey. But I don't know, like obviously it's fiction, but how fiction is it? That's what I'm trying to say. It's just a hard time like that whole like conversation to have. And again, I'm not an expert, I don't know, but it's just the thoughts I had when reading it, which is, I guess, what a good book does. It makes you think. Now, this is kind of, you know, the theme throughout the whole story. Harry comes to terms with her, I was gonna say heritage. Is then the reason she was so, I was gonna say, opponent to her heritage and like, etc. Is it because of the abuse that her dad has given her? Is doing to her? I don't know words. Or is it just, it was also, you know, racism in general, like she didn't want to be too Vietnamese, etc. So people would think her other, which makes sense. A lot of people go through that as well. But it's like her coming thinking that she wants to be a part of this world, which is cool and good. It's a good thing, I think. Another thing that I personally think the worst part of the book is the way the chapters were structured. Because, as I said, we have every other chapter with like her dad or Fuke trying to escape, and then we have her, I was gonna say, living her life and like preparing to go to college, etc., preparing to tell her brother. She also have a lot of ongoing trauma because their mother left her a few years ago. He never returned, so they only have their dad. I forgot to say that part. Maybe that should have been important earlier. But I was trying to say that those chapters with Jane in, it's not even our time because it's 1999, but those chapters were really, what's it called, they didn't hang together well enough for me. It felt like it was one short story in each chapter, where I wanted more a consistent story throughout them, while like Fuchs chapters felt like it started right after the other chapter ended. Jane's chapters was where we're like, on this chapter we're going to family dinner, and then the next chapter we're going to Disneyland. I was like, what? Why are we suddenly in Disneyland when the last chapter we were like cooking dinner or something? I don't remember exactly, but you get what I mean. So it made the story inconsistent to me, because suddenly she had like, I wouldn't exactly say new thoughts, but she had like new stuff going on, or like thinking, reflections, and I feel like I missed some of those reflections in between these chapters. And like her inner turmoil and journey in general, of like the beginning of the book and the last part of the book, there was like one kind of change, is where like she decides to tell this whole full story of what happened to the dad, to her brother, so that he will think about their heritage and where they come from, etc. Which is not even like a spoiler, because it's like how the story starts. That is kind of where we ended up. But I didn't really get, throughout reading this book, throughout reading these journeys, her meeting family members. They even went to Vietnam, and that was just suddenly in the chapter as well, by the way. It was just like Disneyland, dinner, and then we were Vietnam. And I was like, and then we didn't even like spend a lot of time there, which I feel like should have been a huger part of the book, which is us again, how I felt every chapter with Jane was like a short story. It didn't get emotional impact from her moments, because in the next part we were done there. But my point is that because of how these chapters felt disjointed to me, when we came to, I was gonna say, the conclusions, the emotional turmoil we have in the end, because of that, and how it was, as I said, separated, I didn't feel it. Was quite convinced in the end of how we got there, in a way. I was just like, oh, you're here now. And I didn't, like, never got that, oh, this is the development. And I don't mean to say that the author needs to write it out every single word, that the character's like, now the character wants to explore deeper into the family's past. I don't need like that written out as a sentence. But I missed something there of like, I was gonna say maybe an emotional connection to how we concluded the story, which made the whole book feel for me a bit like, oh, you know, it didn't hit that point of like the story when we set it up, of how I feel we're gonna end up. it didn't hit that point for me. And this is a bit same, not exactly, but not completely the same, but a bit with Fuchs' point of view as well. Whereas we just see him go through a lot of trauma. They're like, this is all the shit he went through. And then, bam, he's in America, kind of. And I was just like, oh. So I didn't ever saw, like, more to his character in the past as well. I don't know how to explain it. It's, like, very one side. While, like, Jane is supposed to show multiple sides, but I never got, like, when we got to that shift. I don't know how to explain it. Overall, the emotional impact this book should have had didn't happen to me. And I'm not saying that the book is bad. It has some very important topics and interesting things happening. We have some soft moments with the dad as well. But again, I'm just like, the whole abuse thing is making me like, no. That's me. But it just brings up so many parts where you feel a connection to them, but it lost me a bit. So it made me just feel okay towards the whole thing. I don't know how to explain it better than that. It's not a bad book by any means. I think that other people might like love it even more than I did. It's a very well written, sad and personal story, as I said. At least I think it feels personal. And again, you know, we said in 1999, it's a different time than we are now in 2023, like with phones and like, etc. It was interesting and it was a good book. It just didn't have, what's it called, that the emotional reach that I enjoy in a book like this. And you know, I read quite a few of them, but it's definitely something I would recommend. And it's definitely a good book. I'm just saying that for me personally, the emotional connection. I now repeated myself 5 times. I'm trying to really put a point here. Again, it's a story a lot of people can connect with and see themselves in. It's a very, very, very different story from, I was going to say, my experiences, which is what I love about reading, because then you read about other people's experiences that are unlike yours. I ended up giving it, I think, like a 3.5. I would round it up to 4, like on Goodreads, because I don't think it deserves a 3. But it didn't, like, it's not a nude favorite. It didn't blow me away, but it is a solid book that had a story I wanted to tell, and I enjoyed it. The author hinted in the end that she's going to write a book about Fuchs and his mother. Why am I getting goosebumps from that? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I don't trust these goosebumps. And I think that will be a very interesting story as well. I feel like that will be really, really great. So I'm curious to see how that will be. I would definitely read it. And I love the title and I love the cover. I want to add that in the end. And yeah, if you've been stuck here for this whole time, thank you so much for watching. I thought that it was a very interesting read that definitely gave me thoughts, and that's what I want a book to do. I'm gonna go now because that's basically what I thought. Leave a Panda emoji down below if you enjoyed this. And you should see me soon in a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.